24, starting at verse 45 and going all the way through to verse 13 of chapter 25. You can find that on page 806 in the church Bibles. Starting at verse 45. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, "My master is staying away a long time." And then he begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come home on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." While they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour."
Well, thank you, Kate, for reading. You'll want to keep your Bibles open at that page. There's a handout on the back of the bulletin and also on the screen. I'm going to pray for us. Heavenly Father, pray that you would help us to listen carefully to your word as you address us this morning. Pray that it really would pierce us to the bone. Pray that you would give us ears to hear. Amen. So if you've been with us recent weeks, you know, we've been thinking about the importance last week, particularly of staying awake. Jesus wants us to be ready, to be prepared, to keep watch, to stay awake. And staying awake is often important. It's not just a case of, rousing the drowsy teenager. Often it's life or death, particularly if you're behind the wheel of a car, for example. 25% of deaths in a car are caused by the driver falling asleep. So staying awake is often very important. Now, this is perhaps a slight, confession. My wife isn't here, so it's okay. She doesn't know this, but I think, what are those things called on the side of the road? Rumble strips? Is that what they're called? Rumble strips? Because they're strips, and I think they rumble. They make a noise when you go on them with your tyre, designed to, if you veer off the road slightly, to wake you up. And I think probably maybe more than once my life might have been saved by those rumble strips heading down the Bruce of a night. So don't tell my wife, okay? This is between you and me. But staying awake is important. And today we have 2 parables from Jesus' lips. And in a sense, they are Jesus' rumble strips. They are designed to wake us up, to help us to know what it means. And so these parables today just might save your life. They're designed to wake us up to sin, to folly. To wake us up so that we don't meet Jesus at his second coming unprepared. And because that would be dangerous. That would be worse than death. So far, we've been working through Matthew 24, and we've seen that his return is imminent, but the hour when that happened is unknown. So therefore, we must stay awake. We must always be ready for that coming. And today, two parables, which I think give us two different ways to help us know what it means to stay awake. You'll see 2 points in the handouts. Each have three kind of sub-points. The sub-points really just the three kind of main characters or sets of characters in each parable that slightly mirror each other. The two parables, I think, will help us to prepare for the imminence of Jesus' return. We need to be ready for it coming possibly soon. We need to keep working. But secondly, we also need to be ready for the possibility of Jesus' coming being a long time away. And so we need to keep waiting. So firstly, we need to be ready for Jesus' return by working like the faithful stewards. So being ready for Jesus' return means to continue to be faithful to Jesus, our Master. That means continuing to do the work that he has given us in his absence, expecting his imminent return. So here's the parable. We've heard it once. Here's a different version. So imagine for a moment that the boss at a local charity he's a well-loved director, and he's heading off on a long-deserved, overdue, extended overseas trip. And so he appoints one of his staff members to look after the centre while he's gone. And he says this, he says, look after the volunteers, make sure that the pantry stays stocked, keep the roster running, treat everyone well. I'll be back. Now, what's going to happen? Now, if everything goes smoothly, then the boss will come back and he might say, oh, look, well done, mate. Thank you for doing that so well. I'll keep you in mind for the next promotion. But imagine an alternative timeline, if you will, where maybe the boss is away for a few months. And then the kind of acting manager starts thinking, oh, look, this bloke's probably not coming back anytime soon. So they begin arriving late. He helps himself to donations intended for families in need. The volunteers who question him, they get belittled or pushed aside. And see, instead of serving the community, he actually starts enjoying all the perks of being in charge. He takes long lunches, he gets drinks on the charity account, and evenings entertaining friends in the centre after hours. He's all having a great time. And then one ordinary Tuesday morning, you can't believe it, the boss walks through the front door, totally unannounced. The hard-working staff members, the volunteers, well, they are relieved to see him. The acting manager, well, he is horrified. Everything that he assumed would be hidden, everything that he thought he could get away with, is suddenly horribly exposed. And so, of course, his position is taken away. He proved that when no one seemed to be watching, he really wasn't serving the owner at all. So three clear kind of main characters. Firstly, the delayed master. So clearly we probably worked out that Jesus is the master of the parable, and we are his servants. Jesus is telling this story just as he's to his disciples, to his followers, just as he's about to go away for an extended time. You probably spotted that, but did you realise that that is one of the ways, at least, that we relate to Jesus? We think about God as Father, Jesus is our shepherd. We know that he's our master, he's our boss, and we are his servants. He's currently ruling in heaven, yes. We're kind of his remote sort of stay-at-home workers. So if you're a Christian, part of what that means is that you have a job to do, a role description to keep. You have work that you need to be faithful to do, that Jesus expects you to find you doing when he returns. So secondly, what does that look like? What does the faithful servant do? Well, we've been thinking about staying awake. And notice this shows us that staying awake isn't kind of just the bare minimum that could mean. It's not just kind of keeping your eyes open at all costs. It's actually doing the job, staying awake so that you can keep doing what you're meant to be doing. And so what is the job? What are we meant to be doing for Jesus as we await his return? Well, I guess if we read through Matthew's gospel, there's a few things that become clear. At the end of Matthew's gospel, Jesus tells his disciples to teach people like us everything he's commanded. And so then as we read through Matthew, we know that he has commanded his people to live godly lives with integrity. Surely in the last days, it must mean sharing the gospel with those outside the kingdom so that they too can join the servant's household before his return. But notice in the parable, there's a particular emphasis on how this worker treats fellow workers. It's a theme that will kind of re-emerge in a couple of weeks' time when we look at the sheep and the goats. Yes, there's lots of things I suspect that Jesus will want to see of his people when he returns. But one of the things that he particularly cares about is how do we as Christians actually treat fellow Christians? I guess that's a mark of being kind of personally godly. I guess if you're someone who's keen to share the good news of Jesus with those outside the church, of course you're going to want to kind of love brothers and sisters within it as well. We need to be those who are feeding and caring for fellow household servants, not abusing them. And notice there is a reward for this honourable work. In verse 46, the master says it will be good for you. Verse 47, there'll be a promotion. Do you notice that might surprise you? Notice that Jesus' reward for working hard for him isn't a kind of early retirement at his return when you go to heaven. Perhaps you might think that heaven will just be a nice break. Yes, it will be kind of rest. It will be kind of true rest in God. But that won't necessarily mean the end of work. Actually, I think it will mean kind of valuable work. It'll be work unlike lots of the work we do now, because it'll be freed from all the effects of living in a sinful, fallen, broken world. So an eternity with Jesus will be wonderful. It will be delightful. We will look forward to it. But we will also be working. And we'll be doing wonderful work, I think, for him, free from sin. On the other hand, we also meet in this parable the wicked servant. And notice the parable of the talents we're going to look at next week. In that parable, there's kind of three categories of how we respond to Jesus. There's kind of a third way, which the equivalent would be of being a kind of lazy worker here. But here it's very binary, isn't it? Either there is the faithful servant or the wicked servant. Either you're hardworking, serving Jesus by serving his people, or wicked. And wickedness here seems to be twofold. It's how you treat others and how you treat yourself. Who's the real boss of this potential wicked worker? Well, it's themselves, isn't it? It's the person that kind of takes the crown off Jesus and puts it on themselves. The person who wants to be the boss of their own life and serves others, neglects serving God, neglects serving others. And we know that's an awful thing to do. We know that people who are selfish and put down others, we're not people we generally want to spend time with. We might, however, be shocked by what happens to this wicked worker in the parable, verse 51. The master will cut him into pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, on the one hand, we need to remember that this is a parable. We're dealing slightly with metaphor here, but obviously the choice of this language really heightens the significance of what we're talking about here. This isn't the first time Jesus used this kind of language. Very recently, in chapter 23, Jesus has used this to describe the fate of real-life people in front of him, religious hypocrites, the religious scribes, the Pharisees of his day. I guess they are the personification of people who are meant to be working for the Lord and instead are serving themselves and cruelly mistreating others. So you see, there is a real danger here of getting this wrong. We need to stay awake. We need to be working hard. This is a fate worse than death. This is Jesus' rumble strip for us. And he doesn't want this fate for us. He wants us to continue working for him. Just by the way, this parable is also in Luke or something similar in Luke's gospel, and there it appears to be maybe particularly applied to maybe leaders in the Christian church. And Jesus says, to those who much is given, much is expected. I wonder if here it's slightly different and it applies to all believers. And there might be a sense in which some of this, you might think it applies particularly to leaders in the church who were given particular responsibility to look after Jesus's sheep. But I think this reminds us that actually we are all, if we're a Christian here today, we are commissioned servants of Jesus the King. All of us, whatever our kind of position in the church, we're all people with work to do. We're all servants of the Lord, and all of us must continue working for him. So, wake up. We need to be ready for Jesus' return by continuing to work hard like the faithful steward. Jesus is near. He's at the very gates. Don't slacken off. Now, I'm sure in a group like this, many of us will feel tired by Christian service, tired, jaded maybe, by working for the Lord, by serving other Christians. Maybe we've done it for years and it feels fruitless. Maybe we've been let down by other Christians. Now, I want to be clear that when I say we have to keep working continually until Jesus' return, well, what that exactly looks like can change. So if you were going to come up to me afterwards after church today and let me know that you wanted to kind of step down for a term or two from leading a youth group, well, don't feel bad about that. That's absolutely fine. You can step down from specific roles, and that's not what this is talking about. But do know this. From time to time, there will be different seasons of our life where we might step down from formal roles or do things differently. But there will never be a season of life, this passage says, when we can step down from Christian work. And there'll never be a time in our life where we can step down from serving the Lord. There'll never be a time when we can neglect the love and care for our fellow Christian sisters and brothers. Now, what that will look like will obviously change from season to season. But we will always want to be found working, anticipating Jesus' imminent return. So please don't grow cold in your service of Jesus. Don't grow cold in your service of others. Don't start serving yourself. Jesus is at the very gates. So firstly, be ready for Jesus' return by working like the faithful steward. Secondly, we must be ready for Jesus' return by waiting. Waiting like the wise bridesmaids. So if the emphasis in that first parable is live expecting Jesus' return to be somewhat imminent, this parable also encourages us that there might be a long delay, and so we need to be prepared. Our service of Jesus must continue, but we mustn't kind of burn out quickly. We must make provisions to keep going over the long haul. So here's the parable retold again. So imagine there's a wedding planned. It's at a beautiful rural property outside Charters Towers, maybe. And the bridesmaids, well, they know the groom has a plan with the lads. They're going to arrive dark to the party with a convoy of utes decorated with ribbons and lights. And that's the tradition. That's just what they do. And so there's 10 bridesmaids, and they're all waiting near the entrance to welcome the boys in. And each of them has a lantern, a torch to light the path when the convoy arrives. These are rechargeable torches. They're Ryobi, so the batteries are really bad, which means they don't last long. And there's 5 of them are really sensible. They've kind of recharged them and they bought spares. And 5 of them don't have any spares. They thought everything would run on time, and they thought they'd be right. The thing is, hours pass now, and the sun sets quickly. And we don't know why there's such a delay in the parable. We're not told why, but from my experience of doing a few weddings, it's the photographer. Okay, that's why they're like this. It's the photographer. So everyone gets tired. Some are dozing off in their chairs. Oh, and by the way, in parables, just falling asleep in the parable, I think that's a bad thing here. Yes, we're being told to kind of stay awake, but falling asleep isn't a bad thing here, I don't think. We have to kind of not always read in other parables and ideas into each one. So they doze off. And then just after midnight, someone shouts, he's here! The groom's coming! So everyone jumps up, gets into position. The prepared bridesmaids, well, they plug in their batteries, their torches are bright within moments, and the others panic as they see the red light blinking, and they flash and die. Oh, can we borrow your power packs, they say. No, sorry, we can't. We've only bought enough for ourselves. And the unprepared bridesmaids race into town, hoping that there's somewhere still open where they can get another torch. But while they're gone, the convoy arrives, the music starts, the wedding kicks off, and the gates close behind them. And then later the others return, knocking on the gate, please let us in. Verse 12, but he replied, truly, I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. So you see there's a very similar pattern with the two parables. Again, there's a kind of delayed main character, the bridegroom here. The idea of God being a bridegroom, the idea of his return being like a wedding, is a big Bible theme. Notice, by the way, just how significant this parable is in teaching us about what to expect in the Christian life, that even in Jesus's own lips, he was preparing his disciples for a long wait before his return. Lots of people might say, you might have heard this, that the early Christians were very sure that Jesus would return very soon, perhaps in their own lifetime. And so kind of the churches had to kind of, make up different things to kind of explain why Jesus isn't back yet. Well, actually, Jesus himself told us to prepare for a long wait. Does the fact that Jesus hasn't returned after 2,000 years, does that mean that we're all kind of wasting our time here? Does that mean that something's gone wrong? No, Jesus says, stay awake, keep waiting. He said it himself. The bridegroom is delayed. And then we meet the 5 wise bridesmaids. What's the mark of wisdom here? Well, it's being prepared to keep going for the long haul. If you hear last week, I said, kind of contra to your friend's sort of Facebook profile picture, don't live each day as if it's your last. I don't think that's very helpful advice for the Christian disciple, because it might not be, and we might burn out, as it were, our resources. And we're not told here what the oil is. We're not told what it is that we need to do. Don't need to be told, I guess. The point is clearly be ready for the return of the bridegroom. Do what we need to do to be ready. Some people want to link it to the Holy Spirit because oil and the Holy Spirit sometimes connected. There's no sense of that here. When I was in primary school, I used to kind of gladly sing, give me oil in my lamp, keep me burning. We're certainly not going to sing it now or here. And I had no idea. Perhaps you sang it as well, and perhaps you had no idea what the oil you were asking for was. But the clear point is, be ready. Be ready for the wait. And that's helpful, isn't it? Because preparing for something doesn't just mean preparing for the action when it comes. It means preparing for the possible wait in the meantime. I remember having been in Townsville for a few years when we had our kind of first big kind of cyclone flood event a couple of years ago, and I kind of went to a neighbour to say, is there anything you think I need to get ready before it hits? Do you actually get some buckets or sandbags? Have you got any advice for me? This was a kind of North Queensland veteran. An old bloke, and he just looked at me and said, nah, mate, just get some beers in and wait it out. And do you know what? There was real wisdom in that, wasn't there? There's real wisdom in that. I didn't get any beers in, you'll be glad to know, but I made preparations for a long wait and a night in by candlelight with my wife. Because we don't just want to be prepared for the action, for the event of a flood, but you need to be prepared for the wait. So finally then we meet the foolish bridesmaids. The word for foolish here, you could, if you're being unkind, call them moronic, morons. Again, the punishment for the crime on first reading sounds very harsh, doesn't it? Just as with the wicked worker. Why were they taken off the guest list just for a little mistake with oil? Well, remember they had one job. They had one job at the wedding. And by failing to prepare, they insulted the groom. Now imagine someone at the wedding. Let's pick a photographer. Sorry if you're a wedding photographer, if you feel picked on today. But imagine a photographer comes to the wedding and they have one job, don't they? Take good photos. Imagine they stuff up the photos, they forget the photos, and then they kind of swan into the reception and say, "Oh, can I take a seat at the top table?" Well, of course you're not going to let them sit at the top table. They get out. You see, if we fail in the work that we have given to do, then don't expect a seat at the party. Let's say if you've checked out as a Christian before Jesus' return, then why would you expect a warm welcome? As you know, some of you know, you won't all know, I recently went back home to the UK, and the first time I got to see lots of friends, kind of friends from churches I've been at in the past for sort of 7 years in some cases. And so lots of news to catch up on, lots of lovely news, good news. I guess for that length of time, there's always going to be sad news as well. And one of the things I heard about was lots of Christian friends, friends in churches, sometimes friends who are in Christian ministry, whose torches have gone out over those past years. It's really sad. And I guess it's kind of heightened when you kind of gather 7 years of news. But for those of you who've been Christian for any length of time, you'll know it's no surprise. It's not an abnormal thing in the Christian life. We need to be prepared, don't we? We need to keep going. We need to be Christians who are still going now, but also in the decades to come. I know lots of people say to me, particularly from other Anglican churches in town, they come and visit and they say, "Oh, that's great, there's lots of young people at church." I say, yeah, it's great. But it'd be really great if they're still here in their 40s and their 50s and their 60s. So how about you? How will you be going in the years and the decades ahead? It's no good being a keen member of your youth group if you, none of the youth are here, but no point in being a keen member of the youth group if when you go to uni, it suddenly all just falls off the table. Perhaps uni was the time when you really got going as a Christian, but when you suddenly had full-time work, Christian services got swamped out. Perhaps in midlife, you think you need to give more time to your career or kids. Retirement, well, it's finally the time to look after number one. I've been giving so much to others. And somewhere along that line for all of us, I take it for all of us, that somewhere real tragedy will hit in the Christian life, bereavement, tragedy. And that might be a time when we particularly need those resources. You need to be ready. You can't borrow someone else's readiness. It doesn't matter if your kind of wife is really keen, or you're kind of off working, or your parents are keen, so that's all right. Or maybe as you get older, my kids are going well, and it's my time to step off. You can't kind of cash in your readiness from when you were young. I was actually president of the CU when I was at uni. That won't matter. We need to stock up on spiritual supplies now. So, stay awake. Be prepared for Jesus' imminent arrival. We need to keep serving him and others zealously now. Please don't start serving yourself. Please don't neglect your Christian family, maybe because you think God doesn't care, or he doesn't see, or he's not coming back. But also, secondly, we must be prepared now for a long delayed return. We mustn't burn out too early in the Christian life. You might be giving it all now. We need to keep going for the long haul. I'm going to pause there. I didn't say this earlier, but we're going to have a few minutes for questions now. And before you can ask me a question, I've got a question for you to discuss over morning tea. What provisions do you think you will need to sustain us in our service as we await Jesus' return? What do you think what will help you keep going in the long haul? So that's a question for you. Now we're going to have question time. I'll give us 30 seconds just to think of a question, catch our breath, then we'll come back together.